Joanna Jo Mayfield is the head of the Blue Ridge Caravan Company, formerly the head of a pre-war trucking company which shipped freight along the Blue Ridge Parkway. She reorganized her company after the bombs fell and began running Brahmin caravans instead of trucks along the same route, thus forming the Blue Ridge Caravan Company. She inherited the company from her grandfather and has been managing it for 2.5 decades. Vinnie Costa notes that although their headquarters is based far from Appalachia, Joanna was making plans to visit in the future. By 2104, Joanna arrives to oversee operations at the Big Bend Tunnel. She has been deliberately delaying speaking to members of the Brotherhood of Steel over the disappearance of several groups of people. She had initially been trying to solve the issue internally, which she claims was in order to prevent the perpetrators from panicking and fleeing. However, Paladin Layla Rahmani suspects Joanna was afraid the news would scare potential future clients off, and is only now cooperating with the Brotherhood because they had been caught lying about the kidnappings. Herschel Clyde serves as a bartender for the Blue Ridge Caravan Company's bar at the western entrance to the Big Bend Tunnel, though he also claims to be an author, an aspiring playwright, and a reveler of life. He has partially completed his autobiography, My Life at the End of the World, a Herschel Clyde story with some assistance from Billingsley at Bolton Greens. As a bartender, Herschel has heard a number of rumors he is willing to share, such as that the Brotherhood of Steel is actually a traveling theater troupe with members coming all the way from Florida, that everyone is actually just in a memory lounger simulation in Hoboken, New Jersey, that Aries is an alien stuck after his spaceship was destroyed during the Great War, that the raiders in the crater are actually astronauts that came down with the space station, and that becoming a ghoul is actually a side effect of excessive Nuka-Cola consumption. Kieran is a potential guard for the caravan leading Brahmin through Big Bend Tunnel during the event riding shotgun. He mentions to Eugenie that he has attempted to find a different line of work many times, but it has never worked out. He is described by others as being untalkative and moody. None of Kieran's blood relatives are still alive. However, several kids from an unnamed homestead are part of his adopted family, including Hannah, who calls him Uncle K. He is an old associate of Vinnie Costa, though any details of this association are not made clear. Elizabeth Libby Wen is an employee of the Blue Ridge Caravan Company at Big Bend Tunnel West. It is implied Libby is of Chinese descent due to her surname and black hair. Her parents both had military backgrounds. Her father was a member of the U.S. Marines before the Great War, and living with him was like always being around a drill sergeant, even after the bombs dropped. She claims that her mother was no better, and that she used to escort caravans as well. Libby thinks her brother and sister are more than enough to keep their camp protected. Her family lives in a camp that is closer to the capital. Her family raised her in a fashion resembling a boot camp. During a conversation with Carver Timmerman, she explains that she wanted to get away from her family, as she was not comfortable in there and thinks that her abilities with guns would be better used escorting caravans. Joanna Mayfield thinks Libby is tougher than she looks, but more vulnerable than she thinks. Libby uses a gun called Jarvie, which her grandfather left her. It is named after Jarvie Blake from the Silver Shroud, which the two would listen to. While she views her gun as being lucky, she almost accidentally killed Carver with it because her aim was off. This is very abnormal for Libby, who is used to being seen as a good shot. The issue is due to the firearm needing unique parts to repair, but Libby's contact who has the parts is unable to come anywhere near Blue Ridge. Instead, the contact left a dead drop, but Libby hasn't been able to retrieve it yet. Rudy would cook with his grandmother before the Great War, although she died before the war began. Formerly a self-appointed director of morale enhancement, Rudy worked at his family's cannery and bakery, similar to Mama Dolce's food processing near Appalachia, telling jokes to the workers as the resident comedian. However, his brothers wanted him to leave, forcing Rudy to take a job as a client of the Blue Ridge Caravan Company, selling pepperoni rolls, telling jokes, and making deliveries. During the Quest Costa business, the player is tasked with procuring ingredients for Rudy, after which he will offer a sample of Rudy's canned pozole. Vera Thornburg is a general goods merchant for the Blue Ridge Caravan Company. She is found at the Middle Mountain Pit Stop in Appalachia. and acts as the announcer and quest giver during events safe and sound. Her father, whom she calls Daddy, used to run the Mountainside Bed and Breakfast and was a Blue Ridge trucker. Her father survived the Great War and would tell stories about what life was like to Vera. She is curious about the world before the war and wonders if they are called bed and breakfasts due to people being served breakfast in their bed. Her lack of knowledge makes her wonder if dairy can be produced by shooting cows with freezing guns. Her mother is deceased, although why is unclear. Vera has come to Appalachia from the west and is inspired to become a caravaner due to her father's line of work. She has made it her mission to visit the pit stops he frequented and wishes to get him photos and souvenirs in hopes he will move on from her mother's death. She is now a new member of the Caravan company who is loyal to Joanna Mayfield due to Joanna knowing her father. However, Vinnie Costa has heard she is somewhat incompetent at her job lately, making silly mistakes. Vera works close to Clyde, whom she views as a great listener, although he cannot speak. Vera is affectionate towards her Brahmin and gives them 2 names for each head because she thinks they deserve individuality. She is trying to defend the area from the Blue Devil. Clyde is a bartender for the Blue Ridge Caravan Company. Clyde currently works as the mute bartender of the Booze and Brahmin at the Middle Mountain Pit Stop. His muteness is a result of him losing his tongue, the cause of which is a source of various rumors. He assists Vera Thornburg by running security for the pit stop, but refuses to escort her to visit her dad's old truck stops. Prior to working at the Middle Mountain Pit Stop, Clyde ran with a gang, and he is glad to have left that lifestyle behind. However, he wishes he was out traveling with the Vault Dwellers, though he cannot leave his current job due to a debt with his boss, Vinnie Costa. Carver comes from a family of hunters, the Timmermans, who supplied Van Lowe taxidermy before the Great War. Carver was born to Deborah and Gregory Timmerman not long before the Great War. He was raised in Lewisburg, but due to his young age, he would have no memories of it. While he was lucky both of his parents survived the Great War, Carver was unfortunately very sickly as a toddler. In November 2077, a few weeks after the bombs dropped, his mother sent a message to Shelley Van Lowe, a close family friend who would later become her girlfriend, describing how Carver suffered from a terrible cough and was becoming unnaturally skinny, although he survived this sickness. Carver's father Gregory eventually went missing, and Deborah felt it was time to move on and find other survivors. Deborah and Shelley took Carver to a settlement in the former state of Kentucky. Shelley took a maternal role towards Carver, becoming his second mother, and she would frequently tell stories about her brother Calvin Van Lowe. Carver is now his mid to late 20s, and is a client and merchant of the Blue Ridge Caravan Company, responsible for transit through Big Bend Tunnel. He wishes to learn more about his father, even if Kieran Kennedy once told him that who people are matters more than who their parents are. He is nervous and insecure, hesitating in critical situations, and has been described as fragile. He is romantically interested in Libby Wen, though his awkward nature and her lack of interest in a relationship causes her to shut down those dreams. In a conversation with Libby, he admits that he is the only member of his family that can run shipments for the caravan, as his mother is sick and Shelley is occupied with her duties as a trapper. Carver would rather not be paired up with his step-uncle Aries during work. Carver is unaware of their family relationship. Carver is concerned Aries hates him and thinks he's a weakling loser, although Aries is apparently fond of Carver. Eugenie is an arms and ammunition merchant leading Brahmin through Big Bend Tunnel during the event riding shotgun. She is knowledgeable about making the journey through the tunnel and takes command when threatened. She expresses her disdain for blood eagles, providing tips on how to handle them. Eugenie mentions coming from a ghoul compound where she spent a decade, hiding from people that would kill us on sight just for being who we are, before she began running a caravan with the Blue Ridge Caravan Company. Originally, the guns and gear she sold came from the ghoul community, though now she no longer sells for them, after having had a falling out with the group. This was due to her being unhappy with what they were doing with their proceeds. However, she still gets letters from them from time to time, and after losing one of the letters has been distracted from her work. She is friendly and talkative with the other caravan guards, and makes comments about her past. Her guard of choice is Libby Wen, as she feels things run more smoothly with her. Vinnie works as the head of operations of the Blue Ridge Caravan Company's operations in the Big Bend Tunnel and all around Appalachia, organizing caravans and hiring guns for hire to escort them throughout the territory. Rudy Fernandez believes that Vinnie sells the product lost by his own clients in the Big Bend Tunnel, as he does not return the goods to their owners. Perceiving other members of the company slacking, Vinnie will offer to pay the player to investigate why certain members have been performing so poorly. Luca is the nephew of Vinnie Costa. Although now an adult, he appears to have been born either shortly before or after the Great War. Luca mentions that as a child he once tried to befriend a Mirelurk he named Scuttles, but it did not go well and the Mirelurk died. Luca only recently started residing with his uncle Vinnie, saying that he has been staying with him a little while. As a result, Luca has been trying to find ways to contribute to the Blue Ridge Caravan Company, for which Vinnie works as a manager. While Luca finds that being Vinnie's nephew has its perks, as no one wants to start shit with the boss's relative, he also mentions that Vinnie does not baby him and expects him to pull around his own weight. Although he does acknowledge that his uncle Vinnie can appear frightening, Luca believes that Vinnie is not actually scary. He just seems tough. He even says that Vinnie is actually pretty cool. That said, Luca does still want to avoid Vinnie's wrath if at all possible if he screws something up. Vinnie, for his part, sees his nephew as an occasional nuisance with problems that can only be solved by a boot up his ass. But the two are still family, and any rifts between them are part of being related and will always work themselves out. One source of conflict between Luca and Vinnie is the role that Luca plays at Blue Ridge. Luca struggles to find ways to help out with the company, though he does frequently join the caravans on their various trips. However, Luca has recently found a niche of creating homemade explosives to sell. This initially stemmed from a hobby interest in chemistry, but he found that he was bad at making things that did not blow up. Luca markets them as a multi-purpose item to use against hostiles or even for home renovations and landscaping. However, Vinnie is greatly concerned about the quality of the product and refuses to officially sell them on Blue Ridge's books. Although Luca insists that his explosives are up to par, Vinnie wants to avoid any mishaps, as accidental detonations would look bad on the business. Vinnie dismisses them as homemade cherry bombs, but Luca continues to sell them off the books as he aspires to have Vinnie officially distribute his explosives. As a result of this dispute over the quality of Luca's explosives, Luca has been assigned to the Cranberry Bog. Although Luca is unnerved by sightings of cultists and hostile robots in nearby Watoga, Vinnie says he will only consider reassignment once Luca stops selling the bombs under the table. However, Luca is none too dissuaded by his uncle's disapproval and continues to see himself as a young entrepreneur trying to make a profit, which leads into the public event Beasts of Burden. While in the bog, Luca encountered a group of traders, unaware that they were Cult of the Mothman members in disguise. Led by Elder Adelaide, the cultists tricked Luca by arranging a trade deal with him, upon which they ambushed him and seized his crude bombs, as well as his pack Brahmin, Mona Lisa. The proceedings of the event Beasts of Burden see the Vault 76 dwellers assisting an injured Luca, fighting back against the cultists, retaking the bombs via Mona Lisa, and escaping the bog, even as an Ogwa appears to attack. Although he initially naively attempts to take credit for the escape, Luca quickly realizes his mistake and says he owes the dwellers, offering them cheers for their help the next time they see each other. Minerva lived in Washington, D.C. as a child before the Great War, managing to survive the bombs inside a library functioning as a secondary shelter. After wandering through the wasteland from group to group, her talents finally caught the attention of a Blue Ridge Caravan group. She joined up and ended up as an apprentice to a bookseller, learning how to copy books by hand. Over time, the bookseller turned into a friend and mentor. After his passing, she took over his caravan and expanded its inventory, switching from selling printed media to more practical items, including schematics and recipes. She considers Blue Ridge to be more than just a business party. To her, the faction is an actual family, and she could not ask for a better one. She has one key advantage in her line of work, an exceptional memory, and the capability to copy any schematic, plan, or recipe she sees in perfect detail, not unlike a human copying machine. She claims she is able to copy them down to 1/100th of a millimeter. Regardless of the truth of this claim, her plans are indistinguishable from the originals. This makes her very popular on the Caravan trail, but since she recreates the materials by hand, her offer is limited. Carpal tunnel syndrome is particularly unpleasant in the wasteland, where few treatments survive. She primarily relies on observations she makes during her troubles to update and rotate the stock, and remains on the move to keep her stock fresh. Her talents would make her an excellent preservationist, but she is amused by the suggestion of using it for anything other than making a profit. Trade is the only thing she knows, and she likes it that way. She works closely with Tommy Tentoes, a ghoulified former mob enforcer. While she calls him a big goofy teddy bear, she trusts him entirely to keep her and the Caravan safe, and may have observed him rip out someone's sternum for stealing from the Caravan in the past. Tommy likes Minerva, although his underwhelming intellect makes him unable to understand why Minerva's work is so popular among wastelanders. He appreciates her silver tongue and spirit, and the two are considered by Vinnie Costa to be an excellent team. This is still the case even after the Chattanooga incident, which involved Minerva, Tommy's 10-toed foot, and an unfortunate dog. The two kept working together, but Minerva prohibited Tommy from ever taking shoes off in front of customers again. Minerva has mastered the art of sale, styling herself as a merchant who is appreciated primarily by people with a refined, special taste. At the same time, she promotes her wares in the manner of a carnival barker, emphasizing the range of her offer, accurate copying, and prices well below those of the competition. While her limited selection of goods is primarily to avoid injuring her wrist, she turned it around and integrated it into her marketing, telling prospective buyers that they should make a purchase on the spot, as she likely will not be carrying the item next time. She also has a knack for rhymes and instinctively understanding her target audience. She emphasizes weapons and violence at the crater, hoping mentions of robbery will not encourage the raiders to actually rob her. Casual camaraderie and bad puns at Foundation, and the Brotherhood of Steel's unique jargon at Fort Atlas. A former mobster of Italian extraction, Tommy Tentoes was exposed to radiation and turned into a ghoul by the Great War. Despite his ghoulification, Tommy remains someone with a hulking physique, though he has much more brawn than he does brains. Fortunately for him, he fell in with the Blue Ridge Caravan Company and works under Vinnie Costa, who ensures he keeps his mouth shut when it comes to talking about his past. Vinnie is perfectly aware of Tommy's shortcomings, including the apparent inability to count to 50, but considers him a professional when it comes to protecting Blue Ridge merchants, especially Minerva, their top performer. Tommy doesn't mind the job, though finds it a bit boring, as it mostly entails standing around looking intimidating whenever he is not shadowing Minerva on the trail and ensuring no harm comes to her. Though they contrast heavily, Minerva is quite fond of Tommy. His lack of intellect is more than compensated for by his strength. Minerva allegedly saw him rip a thief's sternum out once. Tommy is often unaware of his eccentricities, which leads him to misunderstand social interactions and drift off in conversation. Although he loves talking, he is rather lonely and only vaguely aware of it. He likes working with Minerva, not for her as they both are part of Blue Ridge, though he does not really understand why her plans are so popular with customers. He considers them just drawings, and occasionally thinks about selling some of his own drawings. He believes he is quite good at portraying animals, such as kangaroos and rhinoceroses. He loves the latter and was a frequent visitor at zoological gardens before the war. He misses them dearly. Tommy was originally called Tommy the Nose, which he misinterpreted as knowing a lot rather than his distinct nose, but received his current nickname after radiation turned him into a ghoul. The loss of Tommy's nose was compensated by an increase in the number of toes. Tommy has 10 toes on one foot, for a total of 15 on both, which also appears to be the upper limit on his ability to count. He used to show his mutated foot to customers, until an unfortunate incident in Chattanooga, which involved Minerva and an unfortunate dog. Ever since, he is forbidden from taking his boots off in front of customers. He grew up in Lewisburg, West Virginia, where his parents ran Van Lowe Taxidermy. His childhood was defined by small-town America and the shop. The siblings inherited the shop in the wake of their parents' passing. Shelley inherited the family business, though Calvin still maintained a residence and office in the building. Growing up, he became fearful about the idea of dying, particularly about him being forgotten, dying alone, and having no friend to read his eulogy. His fear of death became a driving force, and also led him to adopt a backup plan, to record a series of holotapes to be his legacy. His sister considered him as always being the odd sort, but highly intelligent. In adolescence, he developed an obsession with cryptids, and later on co-founded a club with his friends Scott "Scoot" Conroy and Ray Gary, the Truth Seekers, devoted to hunting cryptids spotted in West Virginia. However, the group disbanded after Calvin enrolled in Vault-Tec University in August 2072, though his interest in cryptids never disappeared, and he continued his search for the sheep squatch, with which he had a particular fascination. He was a frequent buyer at Priblos's Curios, a small store dedicated to selling cryptid merchandise, and was a friend of the owner Raymond Priblo. He is said to have nearly bought the store's stock. Soon after graduation, he found work at a major out-of-state energy corporation, the Bishi Company. While his mental acuity and cognitive skills were rated extremely high by professional psychologists at the company, they also observed that he suffered from a dissociative view of the social world and had limited ability to contextualize stimuli. He was also reported as experiencing frequent mood swings, indicative of non-functional interpersonal relationships and attachments to the contextualized world around him. In 2077, Calvin returned to Lewisburg. Instead of the controlled self his sister remembered from before his departure to Morgantown, he appeared to be the old, tormented Calvin again, going out in the middle of the night and locking himself away all day. He moved back into Vanlo Taxidermy, where he and Shelley shared a residence. His sister had doubts about whether Calvin was truly employed by Bish, or if he had just relapsed into his old habits. Calvin did in fact remain a Bish employee, though he was engaged in a far more sinister scheme. As Black Sheep, working under Bo Peep as handler, with Big Bad Wolf providing security, he was part of Operation Mary's Little Lamb, a corporate initiative to stage sheep squatch sightings around Lewisburg in order to drive property values down and allow the company to move in and buy up the devalued property. This way, the Bish Company could utilize Lewisburg to access a natural gas deposit underneath the town. As a local to Lewisburg, Bo Peep was enthusiastic about Calvin and pushed for the project, arranging for funds and necessary technology. While staying at his sister's home, Calvin sold the title to the taxidermy store to Bish, behind Shelley's back, ensuring that they could build a sophisticated robotics lab into the foundations of the store in secret. The construction was rapid, finishing by September 27, 2077, and attracting only minor noise complaints from the neighbors. Calvin focused on the project, planning to use a disguised assaultron to stage a series of sightings on the western side of Lewisburg. He had moved into Vanlo's taxidermy to avoid raising his sister's suspicion, but the project started waking up old demons and feeding his obsession with the cryptids again, so much that he recorded a holotape to remind himself that the sheep squatch was not real. Another complication was that the technology provided by Bish was not up to snuff. The first assaultron was impossible to keep running, much less able to accommodate the custom routines necessary for the project. Calvin requested an upgraded robot from Bish, which provided a superior replacement that Calvin found perfect for his purposes. However, the sightings did not generate the public attention Calvin hoped for, causing him to resolve to be more aggressive. Though corporate fixer Big Bad Wolf remained skeptical of Calvin's projects, he continued to support the operations, as the company wanted any return on the investments made thus far. The lack of progress and demand for results compounded, leading to Calvin missing his scheduled check-in and receiving his first and only warning. Calvin was reminded of what the consequences were. A second failure to check in would result in the whole project being scrapped and the wolf cleaning up all traces of Bish's involvement. Frustrated by the threats, he resolved to make the assaultron into a proper imposter sheep squatch for extra authenticity. However, the damage was done, and even Bo Peep, once his advocate at Bish, became concerned, especially after Wolf showed Calvin's psychiatric evaluation to her. She resolved to see the job through, believing that Calvin's new approach was pure science, rather than social engineering. Calvin failed at the latter, but the former was playing to his strengths. Wolf arranged a meeting to receive a report in person, unaware that Calvin was about to make a grave mistake. The new approach required Calvin to make modifications to the assaultron's core behavioral subroutines. Around October 18, 2077, Calvin started the process. Skipping through the manual and hastily signing liability waivers, Calvin inserted a holotape with the sheepsquatch behavior into the console, uploading it to the assaultron. He then set the parameters for sheepsquatch mating rituals, in an attempt to hasten finding the actual creature. However, the assaultron identified the request as conflicting with the company's HR guidelines and promptly filed a report. Calvin reacted instantly, trying to execute an administrative override and preventing the company from being notified. Rather than override, the assaultron understood the command as overwrite and asked for confirmation. Calvin confirmed the request, realizing too late that he was replacing the original assaultron programming, overwriting it completely with the sheepsquatch personality. The robot mauled Calvin before escaping the shop into Appalachia. Its first steps led to Bastion Park, where Bo Peep met a grisly end, vaporized by the assaultron's head laser. Calvin survived barely with a damaged face, unable to walk, and with internal bleeding. His emergency stash of medical supplies saved his life, barely, and he started recording his legacy holotapes, Protocol Aries. Unfortunately, he missed his second check-in, leading to the big bad Wolf starting the cleanup. By the time Wolf arrived at the taxidermy shop, Calvin was gone, after he unsuccessfully tried to secure medical aid through Bish's network, only to be rejected. Rather than hunt him down, Wolf focused on recapturing the loose imposter sheepsquatch. Shelley Van Lowe, completely unaware of Calvin's work with Bish, filed a missing persons report. Any attempt at finding him was cut short by the Great War. Calvin survived, barely, hiding in uncanny caverns. He greeted the nuclear holocaust of the Great War with a recitation of Atenaeus by Percy Bysshe Shelley, before emerging into post-nuclear Appalachia. After the bombs settled, Shelley began circulating posters around Appalachia, hoping that someone would be able to bring her some closure with regards to what happened to her brother. Eventually, she gave up and moved on, settling in Kentucky. She left Calvin a note in case he ever returned. Calvin had other priorities, however. Although the wounds were slowly healing, he was in constant pain, pushing through the pain to talk. He moved north, to Welch, to try and find his old friend and fellow truth-seeker Ray Gary. He found him on the upper floor of Gary's home, badly injured in a wheelchair, and lamenting his wife, Laura, having not returned from a scavenging trip. Slipping in and out of lucidity, Ray realized who Calvin was, happy to see his friend again after the bombs. Although he did not explicitly name the sheepsquatch, Ray said that it was real and had been what injured him. Calvin responded with a solemn, "I know." Unable to make Ray realize that Laura was gone, Calvin left Ray a bottle of whiskey and departed. Adopting a new name, Aries, Calvin left Appalachia, moving to Kentucky and starting work for an outfit known as the Blue Ridge Caravan Company. As a caravan guard, he was initially only assigned to the company's routes within Kentucky, but Aries returned to Appalachia around 2103, as Blue Ridge expanded operations into the area, now safe from the scorched plague. Aries developed a chipper, trickster-like persona over the decades since the Great War, in a complete change from the previous gloomy, brooding engineer he once was. The return to his home region certainly played a role, with Aries indulging in his penchant for drama to the point that it astonished even Eugenie, who had known Aries since he started work in Kentucky. He still has an interest in all things cryptic, bizarre, and generally strange, though he keeps his obsessions under wraps with a healthy dose of humor. His encyclopedic knowledge of these topics makes him an odd but welcome addition to the team, while his insistence on wearing a mask all the time has led to good-natured ribbing. Herschel Klein jokingly theorizes that Aries is actually an alien stuck on Earth, forced to make caravan runs to make ends meet. In reality, Aries is neither an alien nor a ghoul, simply a scarred human. The mask is necessary to keep his injuries stable and help him breathe, as having his face ripped off left long-term damage he was unable to fix. The mask stabilizes his injuries and facilitates breathing, allowing him to work as a caravan guard like any other fighter. Years of difficulty breathing due to blood caked up in his throat became manageable, with the added bonus of becoming unrecognizable to any Bish robots. The encounter left him with a deep fear of killer robots, or former employees. Aries struggled the most with his legacy, in particular since his sister worked for the same caravan company he joined. It was a reason for him to stay, but he still struggled to figure out whether he should fade into obscurity or reveal himself to his family. Aries' return to Appalachia was a way to resolve his internal stalemate, while making a positive impact on the world. Aries believes that positive change occurs despite the world's resistance to it, and that effort makes a difference, no matter how difficult it is at first. While Blue Ridge was busy blazing a trail into Appalachia through Big Bend Tunnel, Aries got the opportunity to provide more substantial aid. While he was technically just a caravan guard, his Bishi credentials and knowledge were instrumental when Paladin Layla Rahmani of the Brotherhood 1st Expeditionary Force investigated a string of Wastelander disappearances. Aries was crucial in navigating the Harper's Ferry Tunnel where the disappearances occurred, which also happened to be used by Blue Ridge as a potentially safer alternative to other routes into Appalachia. Blue Ridge ceased using the tunnel, however, after a full caravan of about 15 people went missing en route, which alerted the Brotherhood. Paladin Rahmani suspected Blue Ridge of foul play, which was not helped by Aries and Joanna Mayfield's reluctance to explain their role with the tunnel. Aries was a prime suspect, as he was involved in travel through the Harper's Ferry Tunnel until it was sealed up. Eventually, Joanna agreed to provide aid and ordered Aries to return to the tunnel with the Brotherhood and investigate it. The crime scene was sealed up thanks to Aries himself, who set off a bogus gas leak to seal the tunnel off. Although he never worked at the Harper's Ferry Tunnel specifically before the Great War, Aries' knowledge of Bish procedures and technology allowed the group to unseal the tunnel, albeit with some difficulty, and survive attacks by strangler-infested feral ghouls, granting them access to the deepest reaches of the infrastructure secretly built by Bish to ship natural gas out of the region unnoticed. Rahmani's suspicion of Aries only grew the deeper they went, spurred on by Aries' eccentric antics, coupled with Bish's arcane security measures and a sheep squatch mimicking a Saltron lurking in the tunnel. The latter in particular caused Aries' old demons to briefly resurface. Rahmani almost lashed out at Aries, suspecting an elaborate cover-up on part of Blue Ridge, though she relented when Aries finally led them to the caravan stop. Rahmani and her aide located enough intel to implicate Edgar Blackburn and Hellcat Company as major suspects, simultaneously clearing Blue Ridge's name. The Paladin apologized to Aries for jumping to conclusions, though she ruled out sharing Hellstorm launchers with him as compensation. Having contributed to saving Appalachia, Aries returned to making caravan runs with Blue Ridge and trying to decide his legacy. The first step was recovering his old Adonai's holotapes, tracking the major events in his life from the mauling by the imposter Sheep Squatch to the present day. The tapes were lost all over Appalachia in his travels, and he elected to hire the Vault 76 dwellers to help recover them. He had caps to pay for the recovery, but he did not have the time to do it himself. The complete set of holotapes made it clear to the dwellers who he originally was, food for the Sheep Squatch, felled at the hands of his own creation, as he says, and made Aries trust them. With everything they had experienced together, Aries chose to let them decide what his own legacy would be. In an unusually serious turn of events, Aries requested them to decide whether he should reunite with his family or fade into obscurity. Aries realized it was a difficult burden to bear, but he was unable to decide, despite spending years thinking on the issue. Aries attributed his indecision to being a wild card, but would abide by any decision made by the dwellers. More specifically, Aries was conflicted on whether or not he should reveal his true identity to Carver Timmerman. Unbeknownst to Carver, Aries is his step-uncle. Shelley Van Lowe, Aries' sister, had married Deborah Timmerman after the Great War. Shelley and Deborah raised Carver together after his father, Gregory Timmerman, was presumed dead, having perished in the burning mine. Carver had heard stories of his uncle Calvin from Shelley, but did not know that he was alive. If Carver is shown the holotape protocol Adonais-6, he is shocked to discover his familial connection to Aries. Although he is excited to know that his uncle Calvin is alive, he finds that difficult to balance, having already known Aries and being slightly freaked out by his eccentricities. However, Carver knows that Aries has a good heart and will continue to keep him safe on the caravan routes. Aries says he will also continue to spend time with Carver, as he is a good kid, and the time they spend together is rewarding. He does not have the courage yet to face Shelley himself, though he will leave a letter with Carver to deliver to her. No matter how his story is resolved by the Vault 76 dwellers, they can thank him for finally explaining everything, to which Aries will reply that he is proud of himself for holding back on his tragic origin story for so long. The only unresolved question on Aries' mind is how exactly there was another imposter sheepsquatch in the Harper's Ferry tunnel. He had attempted to research Scoot Conroy's terminal at one point, but did not find anything definitive and became terrified by the idea that the imposter sheepsquatch was repopulating. Aries speculates that the sheepsquatch mating rituals program could have, some way somehow, actually created a sheepsquatch imposterling. However, in typical Aries fashion, he playfully brushes off the notion when asked about it.